Hello, and welcome to our module on programming your controller. Now, before we start, we just wanted to clarify that programming a controller, this module is really to walk you through the concepts of working with a manual controller as opposed to a smart controller. Now, some of the challenges that there are multiple manufacturers and they all work a little bit differently, and yet the underlying principles are the same. This module is also really geared towards the simpler controllers that you would find in a residential setting. So we're actually going to do this in two phases. We're going to start out with a really simple program. We're just going to program one zone, and then we're going to take another pass, make it a little bit more complicated so that you can see how you would manage multiple zones. So here we have a typical manual controller, and you can see it's a combination of buttons, dials, knobs, what have you. And again, they are configured a little bit differently depending on the model that you are working with. So we are going to start out by programming the irrigation for a lawn. So it's overhead spray. We're just worrying about one zone. We know that we want to start at 4 in the morning. We're going to run it for 8 minutes, and we want it to irrigate every other day. So those are our underlying parameters. So here are the key functions of a typical controller. Starting at the top right, the magic button, run. We get this question all the time. My controller's not working, and it literally is, well, have you turned it on? Is it set to run? Or sometimes it will be auto. Next, you have the control buttons. So that is the way that you will move through the menu. Then there is the program selection. We'll talk about that button in more detail in the second part of this sequence. Pretty self-evident are date and time, start time, run time, watering days. And then we come around clockwise, seasonal adjustment, running that irrigation system manually. The rain sensor, you want to make sure that that is on. And then, of course, whether or not the controller itself is on or off. So we will make our way through those different buttons. One thing, very logical, is depending on which controller you are working with or looking at, it is to download the manual. Everything is available online, and it just makes it so much easier, obviously, to understand how your specific controller is working. So we are going to start with setting the start time. You want to make sure that this actually gets programmed correctly because everything else will be using that as a reference. So you go ahead and program that. And then you set that irrigation start time. So if you have multiple zones, you have to remember that they will run one after the other. And so when you start your system, you want to make sure that by the time the irrigation is done, has completed, that you are within whatever your local requirements are for running an irrigation system. So we have set that our irrigation can run pretty much anytime between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. And again, make sure that you know what your local codes are requiring. And then this setting will activate the sequence. So we said that our lawn would start at 4 a.m. So we would go ahead and set it to 4 a.m. And then if there were other zones, they would follow after that. Now, the next thing you want to put in is how long is that irrigation going to run? Well, thankfully, you have taken the other modules in this class and you know how to figure out what your TERT is. So that's a big one right there. That information must be provided by you. And then you will use those plus and minus buttons in order to add or reduce the time. After that, you are setting the watering days. And again, you will be moving through a menu in order to do that. Depending on the controller, most of them are, you can enter which day of the week you're watering. So it's a Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. There's the option of doing odd or even days. Some areas are requiring that. Or it can be at a fixed interval. So hypothetically, I'm watering every 2 weeks, or I'm watering every 23 days. Again, this is all information that you have already calculated based on the work that you've done with TERT. And then you turn it to run. So that was easy. One zone, very simple. Gets a little more complicated. Oh, wait, not done yet. What about managing runoff? So we know that that is a big issue, especially if you're dealing with turfs, with compacted soils. Potentially you are seeing runoff after 3 to 4 minutes. If you're on a slope, it's even more significant than that. So in our scenario, we have runoff that's occurring after 4 minutes. On this particular controller, there is a cycle and soak feature, but it is hidden. So there is a way of, again, moving through the menu so that you can find that. And then what you will do is enter in the cycle time, which in our case is 4 minutes, and then the soak time, which is half an hour. You can see how this is so much easier if you have a smart controller, because they do all of this for you. So now we're going to go ahead and program a manual controller, but with multiple zones. So what if we have multiple hydrozones? What if it's not just one simple lawn? So we've got an example for us here. We've actually got 4 different hydrozones. We have a lawn, which is a high water using plant. It's sunny and we're watering it with spray. Zone 2 is edibles, also high ET, but not quite as much as lawn. Also in the sun and also being watered with spray. And then we have some natives. We have some natives in the sun and we have some natives in the shade. Both of them are being watered by drip. So it's important to understand that each of those different hydrozones needs its own valve, and each of those valves needs to be scheduled on the controller. So we'll have 4 different schedules, or we need to be able to account for 4 different schedules. And how do we program that? So this is where looking at programs can be of benefit. The best description I saw of working with programs was imagining that they were mini controllers. Basically what they do is they allow you to group zones together that have similar watering needs or irrigation types. So based on the image that we just saw, we've got 2 different programs that we're going to run. We're running our zones 1 and 2, which are high ET plants. We're going to run those on program A. And then for our natives, which are low ET, we're going to run those on program B. So imagining that I have a controller for 1 and 2, and then a separate controller for 3 and 4. So some of the things are a given. Your date and time should already be set. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to program one program at a time. So we start with program A, and then we do the same function for program B. So we start with program A, which you can see is that little area in the circle. So that again will allow us to move through the menu. We select program A, and then for program A, we set the start time. And then you move through the menu again, you select program B, and you set the start time for that. So a key thing you need to make sure that you're taking into consideration is, because you now have 2 start times, is to make sure that the start times are not overlapping. So basically what you want to do is to run through the schedule for program A, see where it ends, and then at that point, that would become the starting point for program B. You want to make sure that they don't overlap. Then again, a very similar process. We're now setting the run times for each program. You go into program A and you go to zone 1. So it's like there's a hierarchy. Program A is the top level, and then you drop down to the next level, which is to program your zones individually. Again, you're using those arrows and those buttons to navigate through the times. We said zone 1 was lawn. We're programming that for 8 minutes to run. And then zone 2 was our edibles. And that is going to run for 4 minutes. Then you move to program B and you repeat the process. So we enter zone 3, the runtime. We enter zone 4, the runtime. Zone 3, because it was in the sun, we're running for 45 minutes. And then zone 4, because it was in the shade, we're running for 35 minutes. And then you set the watering days. You can see once you start to get the flow of this, the logic of this, it becomes really easy to move through the controller. So next question up, and it's literally you're working your way around the clock. Which days are we irrigating for each program? So for program A, the interval needs to be consistent. So whatever is working for zone 1 will be the same for zone 2. Zone A, we are setting to every other day. Program A, we're running every other day. And program B, we're doing every 2 weeks because that is for drip irrigation. And then you click run. So the last thing we're going to talk about is seasonal adjustment. When you are programming a manual controller, when you run your calculations for TERT, what we're doing is we are setting the controller for the highest amount, for the highest watering period. And then you adjust for that. So basically you are programming for midsummer, July, August. And then what you would do is go back and adjust based on the rest of the year. So as we move into fall, you're cutting it back to 50%. As we move into winter, assuming we've got rains, or depending on your weather patterns, you are potentially turning it off completely. Then comes springtime, we turn it back on, potentially at 50%, might be a little more, might be a little bit less. And then as we move back into summertime, we are back up at 100%. And that is it. Thank you for joining us.